Sadler, and this is the Washington Times Politically Unstable. Today, I am joined with Harmeet Dhillon, the Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division at the DOJ. Harmeet, thank you so much for joining us. I want to get kind of right at the heart of the matter. The division that you're now heading was weaponized under previous administrations, under the Obama administration, under the Biden administration, where there was all these frivolous lawsuits filed that a lot of conservatives thought were targeted directly at them, their religious beliefs, their ideology, for just disagreeing with the democratic regimes that were in charge. What have you encountered since coming and being appointed to your position, and how are you kind of cleaning up your division?
Well, thank you for having me and for the question. So you're correct that in prior administrations, Democrat administrations have typically been very aggressive in hiring and a very aggressive interpretation of the civil rights laws, and then very selective as well in terms of what types of cases they would bring under the civil rights statutes. That is our statutory mandate in the Civil Rights Division. And so what I was asked to do when I took this job, I am a civil rights lawyer for several decades now. And so I came in with my own interests, but more importantly, the president's agenda is his right to set as the head of the executive branch of the government. We're part of that. And so it was made clear to me that that's our job, is to enforce the civil rights laws. Number one, I swore to do that in my testimony. But number two, really kind of move back to the center and fairness and equality for all Americans, not just sort of, privileges for some. And that's been the hallmark of how we've done things here at the Department of Justice in general, and specifically in the Civil Rights Division. So my second week here, I made it clear to all the 400 plus lawyers here that, their sort of pet projects they were working on were going to have to be put on the shelf while we focused on the current administration's priorities. And, people didn't like that. Quite a few of them, over 200, decided to take early packages to leave the government. And so we are now working with the folks who are left, as well as some political appointees, and now starting to hire some more people here as well, to enforce the civil rights laws in an even-handed fashion. And it's a joy to do that on behalf of the United States. And there's just so many issues to work on. That's kind of crazy, is like every few minutes someone walks into my office with a new issue. And so we're constantly sifting through leads. Most of the lawyers in the government are on the defensive side. We're the plaintiff's lawyers, so we bring cases for the government. So it's a creative job, but it's a customer service job. So we are responding to the public. We are responding to civil rights violations that we are aware of in the outside world, and we are tackling them head on, boldly, fearlessly, and without fear or favor.
Well, let's talk about some of the cases that you have brought. Most recently, one against Orange County, California. And it's a voter integrity case. Basically, they're refusing to provide you with all of the illegal aliens on their voter rolls. There should be no non-citizens voting in federal elections. Can you describe this case, why you decided to bring it, and the importance of it?
So this is the second case that we brought under the Help America Vote Act, which is one of the several voting rights statutes that we administer here in the Civil Rights Division. First, we sued North Carolina for being out of compliance with the Help America Vote Act, which is a statute that requires jurisdictions that have federal elections, which is almost all jurisdictions here in the United States, to maintain clean voter rolls. And we're entitled as a Department of Justice to examine data upon request. And in the case of Orange County, they refused to give us the data that we were statutorily entitled to. They gave us some data, they redacted some data, claiming that state law was a basis to do that. And it's not. We have supremacy clause, and federal law regarding federal elections clearly preempts state law on this issue. And so we sued because we weren't given the data that we were entitled to. And the beginning of this lawsuit was a credible report that there were people receiving ballots in Orange County who were not citizens. And so it doesn't mean that they're illegal aliens. It just means that they're not legally entitled to vote in the United States. So if they're a green card holder, they've applied for citizenship, That's great. We hope they become citizens, but they can't vote until they become citizens. And, what I hear as a rebuttal to this type of important hygiene, if you will, of the voter rolls is, well, like, what, oh, Harmeet, voter fraud is so rare, blah, blah, blah. That's not the point. The point is that every single citizen has a right to believe that their vote matters and is counted equally with only other citizens' votes. So if even one person is voting illegally in a jurisdiction, that's a problem to me. And there should be a zero tolerance policy for people voting in our elections who aren't entitled to, simply put. And so that is what we're trying to enforce here with this lawsuit.
And there's been a lot of, blue state pushback, basically, of cleaning up their voter rolls and making sure that everyone on the rolls are eligible to vote. And it's just simple maintenance. It seems like a common sense election integrity precaution, but you are being met with resistance. I want to move on. You also brought a free exercise of religion case against the state of Washington. Um, for its anti-Catholic law, basically that priests hear confessions every single day. It's part of their job, but this law would require them to work with law enforcement on different criminal cases, which would violate their religious beliefs and kind of the trust between a pastor and a parishioner. Could you talk about this and why you decided to take this case on?
Sure. So this is the second time I've gone to Washington State in the last week as well. So in this case, I think the name of the bill is Washington State Law 5375. It is a law with the goal of protecting vulnerable children. But what it does in the course of doing that is as you just described, it forces both Catholic priests and Catholic penitents who go for confessional to violate their faith. And, both sides are entitled to the sanctity of the confessional seal. And the priest penitent privilege is the only privilege that is not recognized in this law. So that's what's interesting about this law, is that it allows doctors to invoke a privilege or lawyers to invoke the privilege when it deals with patients or clients, but it puts the Catholic priests at a lower level, and they should be at a higher level. That we literally had the Bill of Rights, and the First Amendment is in the Bill of Rights, and United States Supreme Court has recognized that when the government impairs your right to free exercise, it has to meet the highest possible burden to do that. And they haven't met that burden at all. They haven't even tried to meet that burden. It's clearly discriminatory against people of faith. And we've actually even heard in advance of this law even going into effect that throughout Washington State, parishioners, penitents are scared to go to confessional. They don't know whether what they say to their priest is going to be turned over to law enforcement. That's outrageous, and it needs to stop. So we are, very aggressively pursuing this case. But even before that, last week we filed a amicus brief in the Ninth Circuit, another case involving Washington State, where Coach Rolovich was fired by Washington State University for refusing the COVID vaccine because of his Catholic faith. And so we're proud to support that case as well in the Ninth Circuit. And Washington needs to smarten up. It's part of America. And in America, we respect the First Amendment and faith.
I mean, what a difference from the previous administration that was using the DOJ to spy on Catholic churches. Also, another hot button issue for the president and for his voters is upholding Title IX, that women should be competing against biological women in sports, and biological men should be off the playing field. The president signed an executive order to this effect, but many states are still disobeying it, California being amongst them. We know that the Department of Education has given the state of California 10 days to comply with the executive order, or they might be referring that case, I would presume, to your office. Can you talk about what you're doing with Title IX? We also know the state of Maine, the governor there, has told the president that she's not going to follow this executive order and that she's going to defend the transgender boys that are competing against girls and winning all of their titles. What is the work that you're doing on this just to defend women playing in women's sports?
So thank you for asking. First of all, we have sued Maine over their refusal to comply with federal law. There are two sexes. This sort of gender identification issue is not a thing in science or in law. And we are pretty clear about that at the DOJ. And so we've also sent a letter. I sent a letter to the state of California, California Interscholastic Federation, which is a organization that administers the sports leagues in almost all California schools, and reminded them that, we'd just seen a news story that where a boy was allowed to take the trophies that are in the girls' sports category. And that's terrible for girls and for women's rights in general, and also illegal. And so we reminded California Interscholastic Federation that that's not legal under current law, and they needed to comply with the law. California responded to that by suing me, the Attorney General, and trying to enjoin us from enforcing science, basic common sense, and federal law. So that is to be continued, ... But we will see what happens there. This is far from over. And what's interesting is you are seeing quite a few states come forward and clearly define what is a woman, and that's good. We don't have to worry about them. But these other states, it's a real problem. And so we are going to make sure by our efforts that every girl and woman gets the promise of Title IX, which is equal opportunity. And it's not equal when boys can take your prizes.
Yeah, absolutely not. And the advantage, the biological advantage men have over women physically is well documented, but somehow disputed by those on the left. Harmeet, what else? Just take me through your day to day, because the number of cases that you're going through must be just immense. How do you pick and choose what you're going to take on versus disregard?
Well, first of all, the president's priorities are a big guidepost to us of what we're going to focus on. So that's an important guide, and he's very clear about that. There's the whole aspect of DEI in education. That's been a big issue that we're looking at. I mean, just today, I've dealt with several college situations involving DEI. We're talking to some of these schools, seeing if we can reach a agreement with them as to whether they're going to comply with Students for Fair Admissions, United States Supreme Court precedent involving Harvard, UNC, and some other schools that very clearly stated that these schools can no longer use quotas and discrimination and quote unquote equity goals. They have to give people an equal opportunity and be fair. And so that's not happening. By the way, most of these educational institutions are just ignoring Students for Fair Admissions from what we understand. So that's a big problem because it is the future of our country that's being affected by that. And that takes up part of my day every single day. We have an unfortunate wave of hate crimes in the United States involving Jewish Americans. That takes up a significant part of my concern. We talk to Jewish groups quite a bit. I met with some pastors earlier today who wanted to talk about anti-Christian bias in the United States, and we gave them some positive feedback and some ideas. And we meet with different kinds of groups, different religious groups, different groups who have issues. We sued the Jerusalem Coffee House in Oakland, California, for refusing to serve Jewish patrons, which is shocking in 2025. And, it's interesting. I get pushed back on that kind of thing saying, oh, Harmeet, that's just small ball. Who cares? It's coffee. It's a cup of coffee. You can go next door. Literally, the civil rights movement in this country and the office that I am sitting in today was kind of founded on this issue of equal access of African Americans being able to walk into a lunch counter and be served and use the water fountain and sit on the bus. It is not small. It is a big thing that any American is being discriminated against in a public accommodation. It's un-American. We won't stand for it. There's a zero tolerance policy at the Department of Justice for that. And otherwise, things happen like terrible incidents like the firebombing in Boulder, Colorado. DOJ acted extremely swiftly in that case, and we are investigating other cases. I'll give you one more point involving weaponization. The prior administration was using the FACE Act to just violate the rights of people exercising merely their First Amendment rights. Praying outside an abortion clinic should never subject you to criminal prosecution, yet that was a commonplace occurrence in the prior administration. We do not do that in the current administration. We will protect people and enforce the law, but that also includes crisis pregnancy centers. And crisis pregnancy centers have been subjected to firebombings and attacks and vandalism and so forth. And that wasn't properly prosecuted or fully prosecuted under the prior administration. We're also using the FACE Act where appropriate to go after people who vandalize and attack houses of worship in the United States. And this is a very pro-faith oriented White House and administration. And that is, I'm a person of faith myself, so that's an important priority. And so it's always interesting here, so many different issues every day. And I've got a great team around me that has come from all over the country, given up their cushy private sector jobs to come here and help right-size the Civil Rights Division and put us back in the right direction for all Americans, not just some. And so it's a real privilege to be here.
That was something that the Washington Times covered extensively, the use of the FACE Act. It was unprecedented by the Biden DOJ in making these arrests of people praying outside abortion centers. And then sometimes the sentences were 5 to 10 years in jail, which was just uncalled for. The other big headline during the Biden years was, the DOJ are using the Civil Rights Division to go after parental rights at school board meetings and whatnot. Has all of that been dropped? There was Catholic churches that were being targeted, abortion, pro-life activists, as well as parents who wanted a meatier role in their child's public education.
Of course, we're not doing that anymore. We've dropped a lot of unnecessary prosecutions. We've withdrawn 2 cases filed against police departments. We've, sort of really stepped back from the consent decree process that seeks to penalize the police for doing their jobs. And so, there's a lot of wrong that probably still needs to be stopped. We're rooting it out and finding it. But the focus really is to protect all Americans. So look, we've had hate crime prosecutions involving African Americans, Latinos, the whole gamut of Americans. Every American should feel like this is their civil rights office. And that wasn't the case in the past. So I'm proud of that being part of that change direction in the DOJ.
Well, Harmeet Dhillon, thank you so much for speaking with us. I think that, I'm so excited that you're there, that you're cleaning out the division and setting it straight so that the DOJ protects all Americans, just like you said, and there are no privileged cases and there's no weaponization against political enemies.
Yeah. So thank you very much.